Imagine telling an adult they are prohibited from indulging in their vices. Now imagine what their response would be. More likely they will ignore authority and continue to indulge those vices. Prohibition doesn't solve the problem of drug abuse. It merely creates and strengthens the underground society for it. Hello, my name is Dennis Su. Today I will be defending the decriminalization of drugs in Portugal. Some of you might recall the difference between decriminalization and legalization, but for those of you who don't, decriminalization in Portugal means that drug use is no longer a criminal violation, just a civil one. Drug possession and usage are still legally prohibited. Legalization calls for regulation and distribution. The distinction was made to help distinguish drug users from drug dealers. While researching this topic, I noticed biases from both sides, advocates and opponents of reforming drug policies. Though through analysis of studies from both sides, we were able to correlate trends between decriminalization and its effect on the people of Portugal. Some quick background on Portugal. The country has been under the rule of a dictatorship behind right-wing authoritarian Estado Novo up until 1974, when the Carnation Revolution took place. It was a bloodless military-led coup coupled with a campaign of civil resistance, which led to the country transitioning from a dictatorship to a democracy. The change in government led to a sense of freedom amongst the Portuguese people, and with it, a wave of experimentation. This, in conjunction with open borders and lifted travel restrictions, has led to an influx of drugs rushing into the country. By decriminalizing drug use in 2001, Portugal has since seen an improvement in the welfare of its citizens. Decriminalization has led to a reduction of disease through transmission and drug-related deaths, an increase in users undergoing and seeking treatment, and a decrease in drug use. A Cato Institute study published in 2009, comparing data from 2001 and 2007, has called the drug policies implemented an unparalleled success. Through my research of the subject, I would have to agree. So, to begin, decriminalization in Portugal has led to a decrease in disease transmitted through needles sharing, such as HIV, AIDS, and hepatitis. Drug-related HIV infections have dropped over 90% between 2001 and 2016, declining from 1,016 reported cases in 2001 to just under 50 cases in 2016. The reduction in cases has a lot to thank for the government-implemented harm reduction and treatment programs. The decline in disease transmission through drug use has also gone along with a drop in drug-related deaths since 2001. In 2001, there were 131 reported cases, whereas in 2008, there were only 20 reported cases. As of 2015, Portugal has the second lowest amount of drug-induced deaths in the European Union, sitting at around 3 million deaths per million residents, 5 times lower than the European Union's average of 17.3 million. I believe the data speaks for itself. Many opponents and skeptics like to bring up the case of personal responsibility and how they don't want their tax dollars to support the habits of drug addicts. But just imagine, if only for a moment, that someone you love found themselves trapped within a drug addiction. Wouldn't you want to explore every possible option to help them? As João Galao, a Portuguese physician, has once said, harm reduction is not giving up on people. I think it is respecting their timings and assuming that even if someone is still using drugs, that person deserves the investment of the state in order to have a better and longer life. My next point that I'd like to address is how drug users in Portugal are now more likely to seek help for their addictions thanks to a large part to the harm reduction efforts by the government, such as providing treatment programs, clean needle exchanges, and opioid substitution therapy. This was done by allocating public funds and by investing into expanding drug treatment and drug prevention services. By implementing drug reform policy, Portugal has been changing their legislative structure of their government. The country aims to make a distinction between drug dealers and drug users. Some might cringe at the sound of these efforts, but there's no arguing that these programs provide an effective safety net to prevent the spread of diseases and overdoses. Before reform, prosecuted users would have been made to serve out their sentences while remaining addicted. Users no longer face the same stigma when seeking treatment with fair repercussions. Now, more problem users are more likely to seek out care. Addressing drug use and implementing unconventional policy changes, rather than ignoring the problem and sweeping it under the rug, has given drug users in Portugal a wider range of options of personal responsibility, the very thing opponents of decriminalization chastised users for lacking. Users who seek help are now given the means and a sense to control their own destiny. My last point that I'd like to share is that since decriminalization efforts were implemented, drug use has slowly begun to decline. Opponents of the drug reform policies argued that by eliminating punishments for drug possession would lead to drug use skyrocketing, but that hasn't quite been the case. Drug use had begun to increase between 2001 and 2007, but has since begun to slowly decrease to points below 2001. By looking at past month and past year prevalence, which are some of the best indicators in determining frequent drug use, We can see how frequently and how recently a certain demographic has admitted to using drugs. Indicators have shown that drug use and experimentation amongst 15 to 24-year-olds, a demographic most at risk for becoming addicted to drugs, have shown a steady decline since 2001. The reduction in people experimenting with drugs has been correlated by the American Bar Foundation to a decrease in addiction as well. Prohibiting someone from doing something only entices them, and oftentimes we see someone going against the grain purely for the sake of doing something they're not supposed to. It's been over 15 years since Portugal's modern drug reform policy took place, and the intended effects were not immediately apparent. But now we can see that the risk that the Portuguese government took has left the country in a better place than it was before 2001. In closing, whether you're an advocate or an opponent of decriminalization, the fact remains clear. Drug-related deaths and illnesses and drug use have gone down significantly, while drug users seeking treatment have gone up. We don't assume that this is the silver bullet, but this has been very important because it introduced coherence into the whole system. I hope I was able to persuade for the support of Portugal's drug decriminalization policies, and if not, I hope I was able to at least spark a discussion regarding that issue. Thank you.